I want to turn it over to Curtis Dean, the co-founder and CEO of CBAN.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to just go down the panel here. We're not going to get big into intros, other than we're just going to have each of them tell us who they are, and then you'll know who they are as well. Starting to my immediately left.
Christopher Mitchell. I am the director of the Community Broadband Networks program at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, the host of Connect This and Community Broadband Bits.
Got to say it the right way.
Love hearing that live.
Yeah.
I'm Alex Kelley. I'm the Director of Broadband Consulting at the nonprofit Center on Rural Innovation. Just because we're not quite as well known as the folks to my right, I will say that we are a nonprofit that does broadband planning for rural areas as well as economic development strategies to maximize the value of that infrastructure.
You have a cooler acronym, though.
Corey. Yes, Corey.
Yeah.
There we go.
Envy that.
ILSR is a little tougher.
Yeah.
I'm AnnMarie Gordon. I'm with Calix, and I work with municipalities and open access, and we do hardware and software that runs networks.
I'm Matt Farr with RuCon Consulting and Engineering. I'm the president of a small firm that specializes in municipal networks, design, engineering, construction, as well as consulting with, applying for funding, network management, and just in general helping communities to fund and build networks.
All right, great. Now, as Gigi explained, oh, you made people giggle. That's good. As Gigi explained, this is more of a town hall, so we're not going to have pre-prescribed questions up here other than the ones that we had in earlier. We are going to feed off of your questions. So just pretend that this is a town hall and we are your elected officials, and you got a bone to pick. So don't be shy about saying a word or two or raising your hand for a question. I'm going to start it off just to get the conversation going here, though, folks. What do we think the biggest barrier is to achieve the goal of more public broadband networks in America, or the barriers? Throw out some words that you think are barrier or barriers. Go ahead, Chris. You're not shy.
I think the biggest barrier is an enthusiasm at the local level. I think, and I would put that at elected leaders who are fearful. I didn't pick financing, and you're right, but I didn't pick it because it drives me crazy. Minneapolis, the metro region of Minnesota, we're spending $3 billion to run a train from downtown to a populous suburb through another populous suburb, avoiding the heavy population of Minneapolis. $3 billion could connect everyone in the metro region to another source of internet access. That would lower their monthly bills, provide more benefits. And if you took a poll and you just asked people, would you rather have this train, or which is a benefit? I'm not here to say public transit's a bad idea. This one was ill-conceived and ill-executed, but nonetheless, it costs more than $1 million a mile to build off-road bike trails. I love off-road bike trails. $1 million a mile. I think there's a problem that people think fiber is expensive because they don't know how to compare it to things that really are expensive. And so I agree that financing is true, but it's a failure of imagination more than it is an actual hard limit.
But I think it's also an idea that it's out of scope. It's something that roads and transportation and sewer, water, all of these things are within scope of local government. But internet, that's a private business.
I've said that several times, and that's the best response I've ever heard.
But is internet truly a private thing?
No, of course not.
Internet is a public good, right? Now, the deliverer of that private or public good could be a private company, and in many cases is. But if you don't have the infrastructure, my case is, if it's no different than roads. We don't have city-owned UPS trucks driving around, but we do make sure there's good roads so people can get their products and services delivered.
But I think we have to remember that initially those roads were not built by the city either. The roads were built by developers. So again, we have to kind of remember when the roads were put in, the developer built the roads. So the roads weren't built by the city. So we have to kind of reframe things. And the city has to remember they're the ones who have to kind of reframe the thinking of this is an actual infrastructure. This is a utility. We need to treat it like it's a utility and it's actually required.
ISPs hate it when you say that internet should be a utility because they're worried about you taking over, stealing their sunshine. Okay, I'm going to go and talk to another former reporter in the audience. And as a former reporter myself, I've always wanted to be Phil Donahue.
I just wanted to say that water also costs $1 million a mile.
Great point.
Nobody questions that.
Great point. Why aren't we putting fiber in our water infrastructure? Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I went too far. All right. Who's next? Who's next? Oh, don't make me call names. Right there.
Thanks, Curtis.
I knew you were going to.
So I'm not going to go off on technology leadership other than to say it is a huge issue and needs to be developed, and we should all think about how we do that in a methodical way. My question for you guys is, where are the applications? So we've been building the bottom of the stack, the network infrastructure, but networks don't do anything. It's the applications that deliver real functionality. Communities need applications. They need software infrastructure for pretty much everything they're doing. Where are the apps? When are we going to start talking about software as infrastructure and how we build that on top of our community broadband?
Oh, we're just talking. It's just YouTube, right? So that's the app, right?
No, this is
YouTube
the
and
pause
Facebook.
where I try to make sure I'm not the first one to answer every question.
Well, it's hard for you, Chris. I know. When you have all the answers, you want to volunteer.
I have all the opinions.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I think actually one of the most interesting things with increasing broadband and especially increasing adoption of broadband is that it results in higher rates of entrepreneurship. It's one of the best economic benefits of what we do here. And it's those entrepreneurs that will find the software that you're talking about. It's hard to say exactly from the stage, oh, every town of this size should be using this type of software and this is the type of leadership you need. It's really about expanding the opportunity and the foundation to allow entrepreneurs to identify those areas and then fix those problems with software. So,
One question or one thing that's always bugged me, and it goes off of what you said earlier, Chris. It's like we expect a return on investment on a infrastructure of broadband, but we don't expect the same return on investment. So we can sell it by saying it improves entrepreneurship, but then why do we build the aquatic centers using tax dollars? There is no return on investment there unless you, of course, consider the health of children, which is completely off books. So it's just kind of it's an ironic thing that I've always wondered about.
I don't like your question, Greg, and I would like to follow up with you on it because it's not easy to have a back and forth when one party is on the stage. And I always just come back to what is the killer app for the streets? Is it 30-minute pizza? Is it package delivery? Is it biking to school? It's that we use these things. It's a general purpose technology infrastructure that we use, and frankly, I like to keep. I mean, this is like where you don't often hear me talking about keep your government hands off things, but I like to just keep it really open to nonprofits use it, for-profit businesses use it, everyone uses it in their own way, and that's the network. And I just want to say that I think it's worth talking about because if we start talking about how to build the network for one app, we are starting to pick the future of what apps won't work as well. And that's where we really have to be cautious. We want a network where lots of people can innovate and we don't have to ask permission to do it.
Maybe the application itself is the world is your oyster, entrepreneur, smart person, smart city person. Here's what we've got. You can use it for the things that you think are important for the community. Figure it out, because now these things are possible because you have this infrastructure in place. All right. Question.
Well, more in the spirit of
his own mic. I'm still running.
I'm already. Sorry, Phil.
It's that time of the day I need to run.
There you go.
No, you can use that.
Thank you. Well, in the spirit of the town hall, I think I'm going to. Sorry, Danny Fuchs. Danny Fuchs, HR and Day. I'm going to somewhat agree with Chris, but add on to the entrepreneur side. Like, I think that the biggest challenge is public entrepreneurs or public intrapreneurs that have the ability to do all of the things that need to happen to get it done, and including if it's somebody that's been granted the space to do the work in government, who is their champion. My favorite recent broadband story is of a guy named Selwyn Hollins in Los Angeles, California. He was the head of the Internal Services Department. The Internal Services Department, right? And after a year and a half into the pandemic, nobody in the county of Los Angeles was getting anything done in the county. And he's like, I'm from Compton. My neighbors still don't have internet. This is ridiculous. I'm gonna go make a deal with T-Mobile to go do like Wi-Fi from McDonald's. That was literally his vision when we met him. And then now it's a little longer, but it's like 3 years later, and like WeLink is connecting hundreds of thousands of households with cross-subsidization of $25 per household for low income, $70 per household for market rate. But that's because Selwyn had been in government for 30 years at the city, at the county, was super powerful, knew how to work the board of supervisors. So I guess to then turn this comment into a question, what do we need to do to help build more Selwyns, more public intrapreneurs in their agencies?
Don't you think one of the aspects of this is just how little government leaders understand the importance of broadband? And, you know, for every one person that gets it in that's been a 30-year employee, you've got 100 30-year employees that don't really give two rips. They just want to make sure they get their money they need to fill the potholes, instead of thinking about how can I leverage this to make it easier for me to fill potholes by identifying the potholes before I even have to drive a truck out there.
I'm going to say something that might not be very popular, but I think leaders also need to understand. Sometimes we assume as leaders that we know what's best. We know that if we get this internet out to everybody, that they're going to use it in all these great ways and take advantage of it. But especially in the remote rural areas, there is a contingency of people that are saying, we don't want it. Why are you shoving this down our throat? Why are you spending all our tax dollars to build internet and bring it to us, and then we have these digital equity programs that you're forcing us to learn how to use it when we don't even want to use it? And that contingency might be really small, but I believe that it's out there, and sometimes we make assumptions of leaders that we're going to do this whether you like it or not, and we need to consider that not everybody wants it.
But would you agree that while not everybody wants it, that doesn't mean that not everybody should be having the opportunity to get it if they want it?
Right.
And so sometimes the naysayers like that shoot the community leaders in the foot from preventing something from happening. I've dealt with communities where a lot of good momentum for a project, and then you had one or two people that basically were, cave dwellers, citizens against virtually everything, that came out of the business. Oh, we shouldn't be involved in this. Oh, absolutely, this is a horrible idea. You got to fix the potholes. And so then all the other people that would have benefited from that did want it and could, improve their lives from it didn't get it because of people who said, I don't need it, therefore nobody else needs it.
Yeah.
Well, and Curtis, that's why it's important to survey your community. You have to have data to support what you're trying to accomplish. You have to say, yes, of course, there may be one person that doesn't want it, but we have surveys to support that we have thousands of people that do want it. The majority of our population does want us to move forward. And in those cases, when we found the cities that do have that support, not only do they build successful networks, they have high take rates on day one.
Yeah, this is where my team, and I think Sean's already abandoned me, we've focused on trying to do more public engagement, have fun exercises, bringing people together to spread and enthusiasm and support. And I think, there was a time when there were discotheques and people were talking about technology and it was exciting. It's sort of receded, but we need people to be enthusiastic because we need movements to push for these kinds of investments.
Participate in this. And I say, Didn't the Ontonagon Hospital just close that served your whole region, permanently close? Yes. I said, how are your elders going to go to the doctor? Because that was also the regional clinic, if we don't have internet service to take them. And she was, and it wasn't like an aha, and then I won the whole day, but she had not made that connection. And we make those connections all the time because we all sit around and talk to each other, right? We've all heard each other's stories. But on the ground, people don't always make those connections that a really real troubling problem can literally directly be solved by connectivity and training. So,
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. There's always going to be that small minority, and that you can do nothing about. But often those people, once they're educated or once they make that connection, like you said, and understand, hey, this is what this could do for me, this is how it could help me, then that changes everything.
yeah, so I think as advocates, it's also our responsibility to really understand our communities when we go in to do that survey and do that education.
And I would say one other thing that just came up to me when I was talking with Josh in the back room over there, briefly, and we need to have the courage of our convictions and move forward. I mean, this is something that's come up multiple times today already. I think there's a lot of us who are like, we should do more studying, we should do more surveying. And you know what? At a certain point, we just need to say, we have enough evidence. Not having an internet connection is like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day in terms of your impact on health. And so we need to move forward boldly and not say we need to hire 1,000 more people at NTIA to develop this program that is going to take forever to get out. Just as an example.
Stop apologizing, and stop feeling bad because you know it can be done successfully.
Right, but also, Karen, we could be wrong. And so like Matt said, not shoving it down people's throats. There is a balance.
Do you have something, Alex?
Oh, is that true, the pack of cigarette thing? Can I repeat that in...
That is
my bubble.
That is what I've seen, yes. And I don't have this study on top of my head, but I would suspect that you could probably find an article that cites it by just Googling that. But there was a study that found that, much like the Vox, VOX, did a story during the pandemic, and researchers ran all kinds of studies to figure out what is the one thing that most links people together who have died from COVID-19. And everyone in this room should know it was not having home internet access. It wasn't other preconditions of medical health. It was not having home internet access. Not having home internet access is not like causing these things, but all the people who do not have home internet access are linked together in being vulnerable to a variety of things that should not be harming them.
I thought you were going to say it's the number one cause was swimming in a polluted stream with your children, but Jeff.
So, question for Matt, and what I'm seeing now are a lot of areas that either through RDOF or just because the service is just barely good enough, don't have good service, so they're not going to get government funding. What can municipal government and county governments do to encourage people to come in and overbuild those areas?
I don't know that there's much they can do to encourage people to overbuild, but I think if they're interested in building their own networks, then there's definitely paths forward on that. Municipal-owned networks.
Streamlining permits, opening up rights of way. You don't see any of those things as important? Or?
Well, yeah, those are definitely things that communities can do to make it easier, and in some cases they can count that as matching funds toward grant applications, but. The bottom line is you're right. Even these BEAD programs and stuff in rural areas, either the rural areas are eligible, and if they are, you're likely going to get an ISP, get a grant to come and build a monopoly there. If they're not eligible, then what good are the funding programs for the rural areas, as far as municipal broadband goes. So I think rural communities need to be looking at ways to fund their builds and to finance their builds other than funding programs. I don't think that's going to be a reliable solution for rural communities.
Yeah, I agree. I think funding is the key. I think they have to figure out a different way to fund these things. Thanks.
Alex? Oh, I agree. Funding would be the key for that scale of community, which is which is why ARPA was so great. It gave people walking around money that they could identify the problem and address it in whatever way was best for their community at that point in time. We may see in 4 years, let's just say, Reconnect or something else being a good source of funding again for rural communities, but we may not. And it's better to take matters into your own hands, which is kind of why we're all here. That is the point of public broadband.
And Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I've been having an evolution on this, trying to figure out how things really work when you're building a network. And in my experience, reforming your permitting and things like that, it might be helpful, but no one's going to be like, hey, I saw in the news that you reformed your permitting and I want to commit tens of millions of dollars to you, right? Similarly, we've seen cities that are, in this case, I think the county of Santa Cruz, when they did it, they worked with AT&T, and AT&T was like, reform your permitting, we'll do all this stuff. And they did, and then AT&T was like, cool, we're getting all those wealthy neighborhoods in the rural areas now, and didn't go any further. And so, but it is very real that working with cities can be difficult, and especially when there is no one working at the city who was alive the last time that a permit was pulled for every residential street. And so, with no working for the city, they were alive, but they weren't working for the city at that point. These processes are hard, and so when you find someone, kind of like in love, don't let them go, right? You got to figure out how to work with them, find out what their problems are, and then figure out how to overcome them together.
Another thing we've seen is that a lot of the municipalities have excess fiber they've used for transportation and other things that's just sitting in the ground. They have no idea what to do with it. We've sat down with communities and said, I'm sure you've seen that commercial, the life insurance, you're sitting on a gold mine. You're sitting on a gold mine. How do we encourage more of that? How do we encourage cities to use these assets that they have to get somebody to come in and make it happen?
Just on the topic of permits in general, what I've noticed is the bigger cities or the bigger counties, you're going to run into those barriers. The small rural counties and cities, permits are the easiest thing in the world. Where I've struggled most with permitting is federal land, and if you've ever done any builds out west, it's a huge barrier. You're talking 3-4 years to get through all the environmental, cultural, and permitting processes to cross any kind of federal land. So those barriers, if there's something that the federal government level could do to help eliminate or streamline those permitting processes, would be much more helpful than the local towns and communities, in my experience.
And I can give you a little personal experience from that. CBAN, we've worked with 3 different communities where the communities wanted better broadband. They went through the exercise of identifying that there was a need and a desire, and through efforts they have been able to identify a public or a private company to come in and overbuild their towns for very little public dollar. But it has to start with the idea that you need to raise your hand and say, we need something better. And then you need to quantify that so that the private market can look at that and say, wow, people in this town think their cable company really stinks. If I build here, I can get 50% of the market. This is a good investment. But if they don't raise their hand, no one's ever going to know that. So go back there.
You get Jennifer next.
No. Okay, Jennifer.
Jennifer Redmond, Community Broadband PDX. So how, thinking in terms of city planning, in particular urban areas, I like to think in terms of making broadband part of every plan. So the idea being that every time you build something in the city, you're expanding your public broadband network. Because most cities do have dark fiber that they're using for communications or whatever throughout the city. So I'm just curious about ideas people have around how do you make something like that happen with regards to, so much of it is, I think, the advocacy issue, the education issue around telling the people, for example, in the city of Portland, yeah, we could do this. We could actually have a public option. And also helping to educate the people who are making the plans to build things, and not just putting in things oh, we need to have access to high-speed internet in this place, without being specific about expanding public broadband. And then kind of the final part of my question is what can urban areas sort of learn from rural areas that have really kind of started, getting ahead of us leaps and bounds with regards to like faster internet and fiber builds. So that's like a lot of questions.
I think we have a response from the audience.
You have a response from the audience or a question?
I shot my hand up really quick. Danny Fuchs from HR&A, because I got my start in broadband at the Department of City Planning in New York. We were doing a community plan, and I was responsible for bringing the capital budget infrastructure to complement zoning. One of the city planning commissioners said to my commissioner, "What are we doing about broadband in East New York?" And he was like, "What's broadband?" And he turned to me, this was a decade ago, "Danny, what are we doing about broadband?" And I was like, "What's the digital divide?" And fortunately, actually a former New America person, Josh Breitbart, was in the mayor's office under Mayor de Blasio at the time and started educating me and the Department of City Planning. He was that public intrapreneur who came and gave presentations and so on that led to some of the first funding of broadband in the city. Then when we wound up like doing what became the Internet Master Plan for the City of New York, and here's the interagency part, the deputy mayor needed to call for an interagency task force to leverage their assets. There were 17 agencies that needed to come around a table called the Committee of the Whole in New York City Hall. Phenomenally difficult, but it takes the leadership of that public entrepreneur or his or her champion above. Like the real reason why the Internet Master Plan in the City of New York never got implemented was frankly because the first deputy mayor who started the project left 6 months in, a year and a half before it was published. He was the person who would get the mayor to get things done. And when Tony Choris was gone, it was harder for Josh to make things happen. But then back to city planners, it starts in actually the schools. Like the planning schools, they don't teach that this is an element of critical infrastructure. They don't teach how easy it is to integrate fiber into your builds when you're opening up the street in the first place. So then it actually doesn't go to city planning, it goes to the Department of Design and Construction. It goes to the Public Works Department. And the reality is most of them say, why do I care?
I think what you have to remember is there's more builds that end with the city engineer than you could imagine. So it's
Start and finish.
Start and finish.
And jump
with
over many times on the way, yeah.
Engineer. Yeah, you have to have a broadband plan, and really the roads are very important. You know, when you're tearing up the roads, put in conduit for heaven's sakes. At least put that in every time. So at least when you have a chance to get broadband, at least you're one step ahead.
Yeah, a couple simple solutions. First of all, I agree. You got to have the city on board, recognizing the importance of broadband and recognizing it as an essential utility. Once you have that support, it's pretty easy for cities to pass ordinances, like, for example, dig once ordinances. Anytime that street gets opened up, we are laying pipe in there for, even if they don't even have an existing network, for a future broadband network. Another example is new development. If the city's got a broadband plan, they can pass ordinances that say any new developments, you are putting pipe in the ground that the city's going to own that's for future broadband use.
Yeah, it's never too late to start doing that. One of the things that that I think about with this is that I think there's actually more hope coming sooner than you might think. One of the things that I've observed over the last 18 years is how change happens. And I'm a strong believer in Harold Feld's, and he would never claim to have made it up, but he's observed that permanent change is culture change. And like for this to work, it's culture change. And I would just add on to that, like, if you're familiar with like how we came to a theory of plate tectonics, all the people who believed in plate tectonics, they never, or who didn't believe in it, they never changed their mind. They died. Younger scientists came up and they were taught it and they brought it in. Well, in city engineer offices and in city councils and in all around the place, we have younger people who have been exposed to this stuff and enthusiastic about it. And we can't sit around and pretend it's like 10 years ago where no one in the city agreed with us. There are people within the city that agree with us. And we need to be creative about making sure that we're working with them proactively and having campaigns that recognize we need an inside game and an outside game where you have a strategy on the outside to try to really help that person build power on the inside. And you're not kind of undermining them unintentionally through the wrong messaging or things like that. And so it does involve being a little bit more sophisticated, and I think recognizing that there is a new time, and right now there's a significant shift of younger people coming into cities and counties that are interested in this sort of a thing. But I think it won't help if we come in and we're like, you're dumb for not doing this 5 years ago. And so there's a little bit of a making sure that we have a good approach for taking advantage of that.
Casey.
Yeah.
All right. Casey, Lloyd, Keller, and Heckman. This builds it's just a comment partly on what Danny was saying. And at root, I guess, complexity is the enemy. And there seems to be a sliding scale between the size of the jurisdiction and the likelihood of getting anything done in a short-term period of time. And this gets to an overarching comment about the role of government and whether private sector is more efficient and such. It's great to have ambitious plans, but when we see a plan, and by the way, I'm an attorney, so complexity is what we do, right? But when we see a plan come across our desk and it involves 8 jurisdictions and wanting to do a feasibility study and trying to bring in these stakeholders to figure out what you're gonna, I'm immediately seeing 5 years down the road before anything really gets done. Yeah. And so it seems like it would be valuable to keep things simple, get something done initially, if at all possible.
Anybody have comments on that?
Yeah, I think simplicity is the key. And I think the main thing to sell it to the community is really, not necessarily to talk about, hey, we're going to get faster internet, but to talk about how is this going to change your life? What is going to be different about your life? And what is going to be different about the community when the internet changes? Not necessarily like, hey, your kids are going to be in the basement more and they're going to really be enjoying their gaming experience. Like, no one's really thrilled about that. But like, what about your life changes? Like, can you go to your doctor's appointments because you can do them online? Can you work from home? Can you do things more efficiently and effectively because you have better internet? It's more reliable. You don't have to spend hours on the phone with a tech help. What about your life changes? And that's the vision you have to sell to the community, and that's what matters.
Focusing on the experience, and your company has done a great job of that. Got a question back there?
Comment, actually.
Comment, yes.
Monique Tate with Community Tech New York, and it's to the points that you made earlier, and I couldn't sit anymore. I passed on it the first time, but it's community engagement and awareness that's absolutely necessary, because it's not about that people don't want internet, they recognize it. And to Chris's point, it's something we don't need to do another study on. We know that it's a necessary fact and that it does get installed, but communities need to be spoken to because that's the thing. We're going by studies, but we're not necessarily on the ground talking to the people about what they want, because there have been many instances when I do door knocking, community engagement, so I'm talking to the people, and know that people also do, as you mentioned earlier, have a lack of awareness, but once becoming aware, then they recognize the value and benefit. I mean, I've sat in homes with families where I've literally said, your son you've got children that are in 3 different age ranges. There's no way you as the working mom, single mom, can help all of them with their homework. But let me show you about YouTube. Let me show you how you can go online and you can have tutors for your son for math, but he's thinking he's playing games. But it's actually, you're using the game concept to be able to help to have them, let them have private tutors. Now with your middle child who's interested in music, they can also go to the University of YouTube and they can learn more information about how to play that instrument that they want to play, or other things. And you can learn these quick recipes that you can fix so you can have a week's worth of planning of meals together. But it's about the engagement, and that's the piece that is missing, to the point where you made about Josh. Josh knew what he was Josh was in a position to be able to talk to the city and put that plan together because Josh was with us in those neighborhoods. He heard our stories and our information, so he wasn't only providing that information based on what he read in somebody's paper or dissertation or something. It's because he sat on the, he was sitting in the midst of community members. Yes, unfortunately, it's a long, slow process because in building the community network that we did in Detroit, just the awareness piece alone took 2 years. We underestimated that completely. We were like, free internet, we're gonna offer it and they're gonna want it and take it. And it's like, what? You don't want, it's because we had to change the whole game plan, and it wasn't just about saying, hey, we've got internet and we're gonna be able to put that in your home for free. No, we had to come in with the relevance of why you need it and why it's going to benefit you, and that it's an absolute necessity for life, for the existence, and especially as we continue to take everything and put it online. You won't be able to be a productive member in society and exist without it. So that's like not something you have to sell, you just have to engage in order to understand why people are.
And that engagement takes, there you go. Yeah, the first round of applause today. Not today, but in this session. So engagement takes time. It takes a lot of hard work. And it takes some resources. So that's something that you got to have up front. You got to understand we can't snap our fingers and make this happen instantly. It's going to take some time. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that many of your cities also have open data portals. And in those open data portals where the cities are now opening up and providing us with all of this tracking of data that they've been doing, and some of them are magnificent and fantastic, but there are so many people that don't even know about them, and that they can go online and find out who owns this parcel of land that's being neglected and no one's cutting the grass. Let me look up their info and call them or write them so these things will be done. But it's another one of those awareness perspectives that's missing.
Right. Great points. Thank you very much.
I almost don't want to go after Monique. Well, actually, I don't want to go after Monique. And what I have to say isn't as inspiring. My question, which is a question, isn't as inspiring. But thinking about the entrepreneurs that you were talking about, thinking about the old people dying out, taking their beliefs to their grave, and thinking about women like Rachel Prettenhofer in Ingham County, Michigan, who's 28 years old and talked her city office or county office into letting her be the broadband coordinator half-time and assist the supervisor the other half of the time. Like, that's the kind of passion that you need. But going to dark fiber on that, like, I see a connection. And so I'm wondering, when you guys have been in communities and people do have dark fiber available and could form a backbone or a basis for their networks, what is their biggest resistance? Is it old people saying, no, it's institutional fiber, or what is the concern?
I think the most common concern that I see is misinformation or disinformation from the cable companies that they're not allowed to use it. Now, there are certainly so many different scenarios, and we all know that there are some in which fiber is conditioned and it is not able to be used in that way. However, what I see over and over again is people saying, this is an unknown for me. I'm scared of it. And there is danger that way. Even though there's opportunity, there's more danger than opportunity in my vision.
Yeah. And in the smaller jurisdictions in particular, it also takes an investment to start to use it in new and creative ways, and they just don't have the resources to do that. And I would add to the mis or disinformation, I don't know what the right prefix is, but we work in places where they just have forgotten where it is. No information.
Great example. I'm from Iowa. Some of you probably know that. And we have a great statewide fiber optic network that's owned by the state of Iowa. It was originally built for teleeducation. It continuously upgraded, 400 gig backbone, all of that.
I think every resident of Iowa is within 20 miles of this network.
Everybody is there's an endpoint in every county in all 99 counties in Iowa. And guess what? They can't use it for anything other than the original legislative intent, which was schools and libraries and the National Guard. And that's pretty much it. I met with the ICN executive director last week. ICN's the name of the network. he's very much trying to get the ball moved to be able to open up. He said, this should be an open access network. This should benefit all Iowans, not just the public entities that was conceived of 25 years ago. But of course, there's resistance to that from the old guard and the other internet providers in the state that say, no, we don't want any competition in the middle mile. So no, you shouldn't open it up.
And this gets to Shelby, right? I mean, Shelby's been fighting this fight, and we just had 4 years of a Federal Communications Commission that decided it would rather have fiber go unused in the streets of all of our cities rather than allow it to be used for other purposes, right? They've refused to act on it, and it's just infuriating.
Don't get Chris fired up.
I think this is where I gotta save it for Friday. This is where I think there's a public relations campaign that would have fruit, where you focus on like identifying areas much like this fiber is right here. It's already there. We're just not allowed to use it because we have decided not to use it. We have decided that this apartment building that's right along that route, it's better to leave that unconnected than it is to change this policy that we set in the 90s as to how we were going to make these investments. These arguments can be made, but this comes back to one of the things that's crucial for me. And like, we don't have a Sierra Club of broadband or a Ducks Unlimited of broadband, right? There are not.
We're trying.
No, this is what I'm talking about. You want to talk to someone about the scarcity of resources? Talk to Gigi.
Yeah.
There are a lot of campaigns that could be effective. We have a few dedicated funders that have allowed us to build rooms like this and to do great work, but there are simply not very many resources to be able to try out these different campaigns in ways that would make a difference.
Okay, I have a question related to that. Nell Geiser from the Communications Workers of America. And one way to balance the power and level the playing field with incumbents is to require greater service quality from everybody. So CWA has a model bill to regulate broadband under state public utility commission authority. We've had some success with that. We put it on hold while we were working on BEAD the past few years, but we're talking to state legislators again about a big push for that in the coming couple years. And so my question to the panel is whether engaging as municipalities with your state about re-regulating the telecommunications networks to actually have service quality requirements around, outages reporting, around how fast someone has to pick up a phone when there's service issues, around, how long an outage can go on, these basic service quality issues that only California is advancing for broadband right now. Would that be something that municipalities and public networks could get together in a campaign to support, because it would level the playing field with the big incumbents and require them to reach a higher bar so that, they're not as advantaged in the same unfair ways that you guys see?
I think it definitely could, but I think their municipalities and public entities are such a small portion of the broadband group that I don't know if they would have enough of an impact.
As part of a big coalition.
Yeah. I mean, I think you need to really get a broader coalition to say, really, even beyond that, we've got to really push this and say this is really critical, even beyond that particular group.
Here's the pushback from that. I built a great public broadband network. Why do I want to force my competitors to be as good as I am? I'm already doing these things, and nobody forced me by regulation. I'm doing it because it's the right thing for my community. Now you're going to make me support something that, I don't agree with that, but I've had that conversation with leaders.
And the other concern I think would also be from the municipal networks would be, I'm so small and you're putting a lot of regulations on me and I don't know that I can even bear that burden. That'd be another concern I think they would have.
Yes, but
we're not going to argue.
That's used as a lot of an excuse for a lot of things. Yeah. Oh, I can't possibly do that. That's too much of a regulatory burden. Well, yeah, anything feels like a burden when you're small, but some things are more burdensome than others.
I would say that from my point of view, I wouldn't go quite as far as you have in terms of the regulation of outage times. I'd be interested in seeing that conversation. I'm very interested in public data And so collecting the outages, collecting information that is available in the marketplace, information that is not supposed to be secret, that is not trade secret, but that is publicly available, but not organized in a way that's convenient. That's where I would go first. And I'd like to see some states doing that.
I would wonder if there's even enough intelligence and data collection in some of these networks to even be able to give an answer to that. I know fiber networks probably can do that, but no, they can't. Okay, well, shut up now.
They're getting there.
But I mean, seriously, I mean,
they would if there was a law. I mean, I'll say that.
That is true. The electric utilities had to do this for eons. They have to record the number of customer hours lost due to outages.
They are getting there. It's something that is a very big push for a lot of these groups. We are at Calix, we are pushing that very heavily, and it's something that is very important to our networks. We want to be able to push this and be able to know when the outages are, how long they are, have these service level agreements basically between service providers and all of that. It's very important, but it's something that we're rolling out even right now. So it's not something that's available even today, but it's getting there.
I love the idea, but because I've been saying for a long time, we got to quit evaluating broadband on what the advertised maximum speeds are and look at what's actually makes broadband excellent. And I read broadband labels for providers that I read them and I just about puke because I know there's no way they're delivering that in Fort Dodge, Iowa, because I've been there.
I think it's an interesting concept. I mean, we kind of lost that when we had that PUC regulation in the telecom world. As that has transitioned to internet, that all kind of just got swept under the table, I think. So I think it's important to bring that back to some respect without over-regulating things. But I think one of the problems you're going to see is if you start requiring those service levels, then they're going to start asking for funding. Well, if you're going to require me to do this, then you're going to have to subsidize my network. You're going to have to give me more money to do that. And that's going to go back into the incumbents' pockets again. So it kind of works against the public interest, I think. Even though it might improve the service. And we know that a lot, the history of subsidies is kind of sketchy, especially with these incumbent who've been accepting these subsidies for years and years and years, and the money's been given to them to build, to keep things up to date, to deploy fiber where they can, and it just hasn't happened in most cases. I mean, outside of small independents that I think have been a lot more responsible with those subsidies, the big incumbents have just mismanaged those subsidies, and I don't want to create a situation that's going to encourage that even more,
Their shareholders might suggest they correctly managed those subsidies.
That's right. Well, I've talked to independent cooperatives like that, and they feel like they're being penalized because they've been taking these subsidies for years and reinvesting in their networks, and now there's nothing there for them. They've already done it, and yet next door there's a large telco that has been taking those dollars, and they're still not offering 25x3, and they look and say, well, these two things don't match, and it's not fair. But
Well, I love Nell's idea because obviously the federal government is nowhere on oversight. We can talk about what kind of oversight, what's in that oversight, should it be service levels or other things, but right now we have an FCC that obviously has completely divorced itself from any authority over broadband, and I think the states will save us. Or they could save us. So, but the question I had actually, and don't get me started on RDOF, and we can be here all day. But I want to actually ask Chris a question. You were talking about the inability to change a 30-year-old policy that so clearly would benefit the public. Yet in Minnesota, you guys successfully got rid of the 2 barriers to building municipal broadband. So how did that happen? Was it magic?
I'm not entirely sure. This is a law that was passed in 1915 to prevent telco cities from building a telco network, and the governor takes recommendations from his department, or his or her departments, usually it's a his, in Minnesota, and what laws to encourage. And the Department of Commerce suggested that they felt that it would be good to remove the barriers against municipal networks, and for a variety of reasons. My colleague, former colleague Lisa Gonzalez, who helped me to build the Community Broadband Networks program before leaving me in 2020, abandoning me as the pandemic started. She went to the state, and I think that she, had talked to a number of people over the course of the years, and I think that was helped move it. But it's one of these mysteries where the governor and then like a newly elected representative was like really enthusiastic about it, and a lot of us were like, we're just going to steer clear as long as it's moving forward. So I was verily involved. I'm always afraid that if I get involved, people are going to start taking notice of I might bring the wrong kind of attention to it. So we were thrilled to see it move forward, but I think, it's internal people who felt that this was a high priority. I will say one of the things that I've heard is that the governor is not doing much on telecom this year because it was such a hard fight. And so although it was a quiet fight, it was not an easy fight. And when we last worked on this issue, one of the things that we saw, we were working with some high-powered lobbyists where they would come to us occasionally for free advice while they were doing very well, working on creating I wouldn't go that far. But they said that every time they went to speak to the governor's staff on this, Comcast was either coming or going, every single time. And so, these companies, and in Minnesota, it's really Comcast is very powerful and very efficient. So I'm not entirely sure how it got through, but some people raised it up and then they decided to fight on it. Oh, there was two barriers that made it difficult in Minnesota, and I don't think it's really helpful to get into them. But Minnesota's now joined the list of states that don't have barriers. We track about 17 states. Jim, and also with the Coalition for Local Internet Choice, had maintained a list of barriers over the years. We view that as being the single best still list of barriers against municipal networks. There have not been any new ones passed recently, but there's about 17 states that still have some level of barrier.
Have you heard anything from Kentucky, Frankfurt, and that crabby senator up down there?
I don't think anything's come about this year.
Good. I haven't talked to Frankfurt in a while. So, questions? Shout it out. What do you want to hear? Which one of us do you want to sing for you? It's not cocktail hour yet, so you got 15 minutes to kill yet. Okay.
We peaked too early. We brought the energy too high too early.
Because I stopped running around because these fine people were distributing mics and I couldn't be Phil Donahue. Show of hands, how many of you are here representing a community that is potentially interested in building a community broadband network? All right. We got a couple there. Okay. All right. So would you agree in your communities, there is, to have a fire, everybody, you need fuel and a source of ignition. You've got fuel. People in your community want something better. Let's talk about how do you find that spark? How do you find that source of ignition to take that dry tinder of demand and turn it into a fire of community broadband? Just shout it out. Go first, somebody.
You need a champion. And that's the first thing. I think, in Portland, we've seen different people step up, but it hasn't been a person that can fully dedicate themselves to it. I think that's been a hindrance. Ideally, like a person who is not working a intensive job where they're focused on that, but they can really put their time into this effort and acting, whether it's like a lobbyist or whatever, but they are focused on organizing the community, maintaining enthusiasm, and talking with officials and that sort of a thing. You need at least one person that's going to be like the hub to for everyone else to work around who can put in a little bit of time.
Okay.
So you need an unemployed champion.
Unemployed?
Retired people are great.
Retired as well,
Retired
yeah.
volunteer.
We've talked about a lot of the pieces here, and each piece, if you can unlock it, it makes the next step better, absolutely. Right? You need, first of all, it's education. Kind of, we've talked about that, right? Why do we need it? What are the benefits to keeping all these resources local? Education can lead to finding a champion, can lead to outreach into the community, can lead to culture change, can lead to political willpower, can lead to the ability to raise money, can lead to then finally the ability to actually execute. Each one gets easier if you've done the previous ones, and if you try to start with raising money without the political willpower, then it's very difficult. So.
I would just add to that, the success stories that are happening out there help a lot for a new community that's considering this. I mean, if we can get these success stories spread, and when you go to these communities, you can say, hey, look what these guys did. Look what happened over here. Look at the benefit that this is receiving. That goes a long ways in encouraging and motivating new communities that are looking to jump into this.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the role the municipality plays in this, and of course they play a huge role. But one thing that we haven't really discussed is the role the school district might play, the roles that, these other sort of quasi, these other governmental roles play within the community. So making sure that you're working with those partners as well, pulling them in and having them be part of that partnership is really important. One of my favorite cities that I get to work with, they were great. They got their school district to basically fund their, help fund their network because they have so many kids that go to in the schools, and they have a poor community, and they said, hey, if there's a kid that lives in the home, can you guys, give a subsidy? So, working with the school districts, helping to support it is another option of places where you can probably get some money.
Yeah, I would want to just build on that, because I think that is our next step in some ways. And I just personally, in 2008, I was at the National Conference on Media Reform, and people were like, yeah, municipal broadband, cool, who's doing it? And I was like, well, Burlington and like a couple other places, and there was like 70 or 80 networks at that time, but people didn't really know much about it. So our strategy, Lisa and I, for years, was let's figure out how to elevate this and get the word out. And I feel like we have built a really good movement of people who has familiarity with that. No, and I appreciate you, but like it's always been a group of people that has like been pushing this forward. We have, and for the past couple of years, my team's been sort of agonizing over this. We have hit the point of like, the people who are like enthusiastic, they are well informed. What is the next step to move on? And that's what you're saying about the school districts. When the pandemic hit, the teachers union in St. Paul said their top priority was municipal broadband for St. Paul. And when I talked with people from the union, I was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, we don't know, but municipal broadband will get internet access to everyone. And I was fascinated because like I live in St. Paul. I'm like, I know a lot about municipal broadband. I never talked to anyone in this teachers union about it. And like they didn't really know what it was. And like, but they had heard it and they recognized the need for it. Reaching out to those kinds of groups and just I think trying to build that next level, that's what we've been trying to do for the past couple of years of trying to figure out, okay, for people that aren't going to be like, I'm going to run and hang out with this panel, after going to DC for an event, how do we get the word to those people who aren't going to travel to learn about this? And that's a challenge, I think, for all of us to figure out.
Just wanted to throw out there's other ways of doing this besides running it through a municipality. There's examples of joint powers agreements, nonprofit organizations that are partnering with cities. We're working with the ports up in Washington, Oregon, Idaho. Ports are an interesting entity. They're a quasi-public entity, but you're seeing a lot of these that are interested in economic development in the area, and so they're investing money. They're starting to build these public broadband networks, or at least infrastructure for them. So think outside the box a little bit. If you're having trouble with your municipal leadership, think about some other entities that might have an interest in helping to get it built.
I think of it this way too about what's the spark? It's always a champion or a group of champions that do it. But I consider a champion to be just the same as an unlit match. You might have hundreds of them laying around in your community, but something's got to activate that match. Something's got to make that match turn into an ignition source to throw into the fire. And it can be something as simple as what my experience was in Spencer, Iowa in 1997, which was we didn't have a Fox network on our cable system. And the cable company was saying, well, we can't get it for you. And that was enough to spark a group of people to form and advocate for a public broadband utility. Of course, there was no broadband in 1997, but it turned into that. And that, odd as that is, that was the ignition source that got that match across the sandpaper.
So I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I really feel like there is a need for a body of work that educates policymakers, people who work in cities, people who do community development advocacy around why we need public broadband networks to sort of, move our communities forward. I think we've kind of really ceded that information loop to corporate providers, right? Comcast is in the office of all our former commissioners in the city of Portland, telling them why they are the digital equity experts. And it's just like, how do we, collectively as a group come up with, these sort of technology briefings for people who are not technical? Because it doesn't just go to like broadband, public broadband, it's also about digital safety, it's about open data, it's about all of these things. And I think as a community, we need to start really thinking about how we educate people who are making the policies not to feel afraid to like make these kinds of changes and hold our institutions accountable. So that was kind of more of a statement and an ask for help, I think. But.
A thought-provoking statement. From our
Well,
panel.
and the AAPB, Gigi did a fantastic paper on how to build a public broadband network, which tells stories of numerous networks across the country. And I encourage you to read that paper. It has a lot of interesting source data from that it would be great to share with any elected officials.
I feel like this is where local data can be really helpful to take the good work that AAPB has done and figure out how to translate that into local
Make it relevant to their situation.
And that's where, I think that we've worked frequently with AAPB, and I have no doubt that if there was interest, and we can try it a few times to sort of gauge that, to do like an open office hour kind of period, perhaps during the business day, perhaps after the business day, where people could come and we could talk about some of the materials that are available and work with you. Like the idea of like, we have people on our team that can, if you're like, oh, we don't know how to do graphic design, well, like we can like take 15 minutes to help you like design something on Canva at this point. Like we have tools that are available and you're like, well, this is the kind of messaging that I think would resonate locally. Or in the meeting last week, this is what I heard and we need messaging on that. I think we could do things like that with our present level of resources to try to like, support. I don't think we're going to be overrun and unable to deal with the demand, at least at first. And so if that would be useful, then I think we would love to try to set that up.
Question back there.
Is it?
Statement, question?
I don't know what it is. So
okay.
The thing is, I'll say maybe in my experience, and I could be jaded. Actually, no, I know I am. I am jaded. So that's my qualification. But like, I think like educating is like, it's necessary. But what I'm seeing is like, it's the value proposition that sometimes it's almost like we don't want to admit that there is corruption that's at play, or we don't want to admit that there's personal interests at play. And I think like, especially at the local level, like you'll acknowledge politics are local, all politics are local. Like we believe that, but then when it happens, it's like, this isn't a question of education. I think it's more so just packaging value in a way that self-interest is there. Like we can't expect like the Disney effect locally anymore, at least from what I've seen. Like what I've seen is like, oftentimes if you can't package value to an elected official that's either going to guarantee that they're going to be able to raise in ranks to go from a council president to a mayor, or from a mayor to a governor, it's going to be really hard for them to then justify why they would put their political capital on the line for something else. And so like, to me, it's like, if you're not going to package it that way, you're telling them math, 1 + 1 = 2. And like, great, yeah, we like math, but like, I want multiplication. Like I want to like be at that. So if this can get me that, then I'm in. But if this takes me away from that, I'm out. And like, I've seen that up close where we've had mayors believe in something, and then the minute someone then promises them something else of greater value, it doesn't really matter broadband anymore. It's now just personal interest. And if we don't acknowledge personal interest and the overwhelming weight that it plays, I think we're just playing in the margins.
This hits me personally because I think that is the next level then. For me, I lost hope in a coalition in Minnesota, more or less, when the Speaker of the House, who was with the Republican Party, which represents the more rural parts of Minnesota, he said, satellite's good enough for my mom for internet access. I don't see what the problem is. And the reaction of the coalition I was working with was, well, we got to get in his office and educate him. And I was like, bullshit, you need to buy billboards. You need to get this up. Like, there's no education here. This is politics. Let his constituents know that, like, that if that's his opinion, fine. I don't care what his opinion is. I don't care what his mom's situation is. What I care about is him knowing that he's going to lose the House majority if everyone knows that he's saying satellite internet access is good enough. And so there's education, but there's also having a realistic political plan and being strategic in how you respond to these things.
All right, we got Chris fired up again, and I really love that part of it. Do we have any other questions? We got time for another question, maybe two. Anybody out there have a comment or question? All right. What's that? People want to party. All right. Get that man a mic.
All right, let me see if I can put you back to sleep. This is Raza. Economics, worse than that. Antitrust. So we've talked about competition, we've talked about incumbents, and this is sort of an area of the economy where, well, the laws just don't apply anymore. The laws of nature say, well, there's one company there, you can't possibly enter. So there's a conversation on the last panel about how can you get financing to build a new network where there's already one, even if everyone hates it already, right? It seems like a slam dunk, but in antitrust land, you already know what happens, which is, well, the incumbent will cut costs. That's called predatory pricing, and at least in theory, that's a violation of the law, right? And so these sort of scenarios where we can't compete with the incumbent, there's a solution, right? But that doesn't seem to sort of even be in the conversation here. So where does competition, not just as a consumer and sort of market force, but as a policy fit in, if at all? And maybe this isn't the group and this isn't the particular piece of the puzzle where it intersects, but I wanted to ask.
All right, any economists on the panel? Yeah. Well, I
mean, I would say very briefly that this is a huge problem. I think antitrust is like having a moment that is only going to keep growing for the next, I think we're going to keep losing and winning and losing and winning, and it's going to keep building for another 5, 7, 8 years probably. Maybe it'll be different, but this is a swell that's happening. In the meantime, what you can do is talk to the Attorney General of your state. A lot of times, predatory pricing, even if the parties know that it might be engaging it, know that they would probably win their court case, they don't want to go to court over it. They don't want attention drawn to it. And if an attorney general starts to say, I'm keeping an eye on you and I'm concerned about this, they start to change their behavior. We have seen this numerous times over the past 30 years of this in telecommunications. And the I keep saying the Department of Justice, but a state attorney general can really make a big difference here locally.
All right, we're going to end it on that note and hand it off to Gigi.
Well, thank you, guys. This was fantastic. Let's give them a hand.